In this video, we are going to be talking about 5 of the best tips if you want to be a great podcast producer or you want your own podcast to sound absolutely amazing. So, let's roll the intro. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you very much for joining me for another video. If we're just meeting, nice to meet you. My name is Connor Wells. I am a photographer, videographer and podcast producer. So if you're new around here, please do consider subscribing if you're into all that sort of creative media production sort of content. That's the best way I can really sum it up. Anyway, we are going to be talking about how to make your podcast sound absolutely fantastic. Now, speaking from my own experience, I love listening to podcasts. I listen to about 20 to 25 different podcasts, and I notice one thing about them. They all sound absolutely brilliant. I'm also a musician as well, so I really do appreciate good sounding audio. There's some sort of science behind it, but most people will watch a bad quality video if the audio is great, rather than a great video with bad sounding audio, if that makes sense. And particularly with podcasts, that is an important aspect as well. It's the main aspect because, you know, it's a podcast. I don't know how else to explain it. Anyway, let's stop messing around and we're going to get into tip number 1. Now, I know I say a lot on this channel about the fact that gear doesn't matter. I also made a video about how to actually make a podcast and distribute it. It'll be in the card up there, so check that out. But believe me, the microphone is your holy grail. This is the microphone I use. I have 4 of these. These are made by Rode. These are the Rode Podmics. They are great, reliable microphones. Now, you could record your podcast through your phone or through your laptop's microphone, but I don't really recommend it. If you really want your podcast to sound clear and professional, you are going to have to invest a little bit of money into a podcasting microphone. The Rode Podmic that I just mentioned there, they're not very expensive. You can probably get them for just over $100, which is not too bad. This is probably the easiest of all the podcasting tips I'm going to give you today, so we're starting off nice and easy. Let's move on to number 2. Tip number 2 is record in a small and quiet room. You do not want your podcast to have all different noises and sounds interrupting the recording. What I suggest is close all the doors and windows. The worst thing to happen as soon as you press record, an ambulance or a police cast siren just goes speeding past your window and getting picked up by the microphone. You don't want that at all, so close all your doors and windows to avoid any other distractions like that. And if you are in a place that, you know, may have a bit of echo, a bit of reverb, I'm fortunate enough here to have all different sound panels, so all these sort of black bars going around the room. I have them on the ceiling and in front of me here. Those are sound absorbent panels. You know, they soundproof and reduce any chance of getting echo. So, you know, if I clap, there's no sort of delay, no reverb or anything. So what you can do with that is make sure there's lots of carpets, rugs, cushions, fabrics and sofas to absorb the sound. Alternatively, if you do have a budget, what you can do is invest in a sound blanket. Tip number 3, this is a real bugbear of me, but inform the guest and actually the host sometimes about proper microphone technique. There have been multiple times when I've got everything set up, the microphones are all positioned perfectly, they're nice and closed, I hit record, and then the guest or the podcast host actually gets very comfortable and leans back in their chair. It's not great. Stop doing it. You need to inform your guests. If you're a podcast producer recording other people's podcasts for them, inform the guest and the host about proper microphone technique. You don't want to be talking it from the side like this. You can talk to it a little bit like that, but ideally you want to be talking right into the podcast. Don't have your lips right to it and touching it, because that won't sound great. You ideally want the microphone directly in front of you, speaking straight into the microphone. If you do that, you're going to get the best audio quality. Now, here's a little thing that I say to guests of podcasts that I produce and hosts as well. I always say the microphone is like your best friend. The closer you are to it, the better. Keep that in mind. Make sure you inform everyone, and particularly if it's your own podcast, make sure you're close to the microphone and don't be too far away from it, because otherwise the audio will sound empty. You'll lose a bit of bass to the voice and it just won't sound very clear and professional. Tip number 4 is check your work. Now, what do I mean by check your work? Monitor the recording, and by that I mean wear headphones. There have been a few times where I thought, you know what, this podcast recording session has been going smooth. We've recorded 2 episodes so far, and I've not worn my headphones, and then I suddenly get into editing the actual audio of the podcast and the video, and I can hear, you know, like that sound, that like there's a hiss, and that's not great. If you don't monitor your work, you won't be able to pick up any interferences and any levels being too low, level being too high in real time, and there's no real way to fix that. One thing as well is give every person who has a microphone a pair of headphones. If you have that facilities, if you have that in the budget, it's a good idea to get the host to wear headphones. Now, my final tip number 5, is more relevant than it's ever been, particularly in the times we live in at the moment, is maximize your internet bandwidth. Now, what do I mean by that is, if you are recording a podcast that probably isn't going to be in person, if you're recording over something like Discord or Skype or Zoom, sometimes internet can drop out. You want to disconnect every device that isn't related to the podcast. So if you're recording a podcast through Zoom, this is something that I do quite a lot. If you're recording it on your laptop through Zoom, you want to disconnect every other device, every phone, printer, iPad, any other laptop from the internet to reduce that, you know, that chance of interference. Because sometimes with Zoom, it's a little bit unreliable.
It's only the chairman who can remove people from a meeting. You have no authority here, Jackie Weaver. No authority at all.
She's just kicked him out.
Sometimes the audio and the video can go a little bit out of sync. Sometimes it can go jumping in and out. And the common thing is, are you there? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Zoom's unreliable. That's just the way things are at the moment. So you don't want to have any sort of interferences with the internet. So one thing you can do is actually connect with a wire your laptop to, say, like your Wi-Fi router. If you can't do that and you're doing wireless, just make sure everything else is disconnected. Another little final tip as well is make sure you've turned every sort of notification on your phone off. You don't want to hear those dings halfway through a podcast. It's an absolute bugbear of mine when I'm, just listening to a podcast, editing photos, and then suddenly the guest's phone goes dinging off and gets picked up by the microphone. Not fun. Just turn your phone off when you're recording podcasts. So there we are, folks. Those are my 5 tips for recording and producing a brilliant podcast. If you'd like me to make a follow-up video to this, like a part 2, there's a few things that I missed off, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to see my portfolio, whether it's photos, videos, and podcasts that I produce, please head over to my website, connorwells.com, and you can check it all out there. And whilst you're there, if you're a photographer, you can also check out my Lightroom presets. Let me know what you think of them. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Connor Wells. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Stay safe and have a great day. Peace.